Welcome to the Betty Rocker Show, the place to be to nourish your mind, love your body, and rock your life. What's up, rock stars? Coach Betty Rocker here. Thanks so much for joining me. I wanted to continue our conversation about perimenopause, but this is also very applicable in postmenopause as well. So if you're listening and wondering how this applies to you, the answer is it all does. It's just that if you're in perimenopause now, this is a great time to start taking these steps and building these habits into your life because it will just give you an amazing foundation. But if you're already postmenopausal, it's also a great time to start adding these things in. I'm in perimenopause myself right now, so I'm absorbing and practicing as much as I can, as early as I can, so these habits are ingrained in me and I'm really set up the best I can be. But it's never too early or too late to start this stuff. So back in season 4, you might remember I did an in-depth overview of how our digestive system works and the way it impacts our hormone balance. You might really like that one. It's not long. It's called Gut Health and Estrogen Balance. So check that out if you're fascinated by all this stuff like I am, or if you want an overview of your digestive processes and their interplay with your hormones. Today, let's get into key foods to include in the menopause years and take a look at what we might want to watch out for as well. Keep in mind that I know you are unique, that you have your own health history and preferences. So if I share anything that doesn't work for you, or if your doctor or your personal nutritionist has guided you to do something else or something specific, you should always follow their advice. Okay, so number 1, you've heard me talk about protein before, I am sure, but it's just so important. I'm going to summarize why we need it in our menopause years once more because it's a foundational piece of our dietary intake. Our dietary protein is made up of these amino acids, and our body uses those amino acids for all kinds of tasks. You might associate protein the most with muscle tissue, and that's definitely one of its important jobs, right? It helps to repair and strengthen our muscle tissue. Other jobs that the body has that rely on those amino acids include our mood and brain health, our immune system, our hormone and enzyme function, and those are all vital functions. And as we age, one of the sort of frustrating things that happens is that we just don't absorb the amino acids from the protein in the foods we eat as easily as we did in the past. And this means you've got less aminos to go around, right? So one of the things that your body does when it can't get enough amino acids from your food is it actually breaks down your muscle tissue to access stored amino acids that are in there. And if this happens over and over and the muscle never gets built back up, we lose more and more muscle each year, which contributes to a lot of risk for us in our balance, our mobility, our strength, and it also makes us more prone to storing body fat and gaining weight because our muscle, our skeletal muscle, really impacts our resting metabolic rate. And the more we have, the more efficiently we burn fat. So in the perimenopause years, when we've got a lot of hormone fluctuation and it's easier to gain weight than ever, one thing that you can do to get the advantage back and prevent weight gain is to take steps to hold on to your muscle and work on strengthening it further. And one of the easiest ways to hold on to and strengthen that muscle is to give it the building blocks it needs to repair and rebuild. And that is, of course, eating the protein. And that amount of protein is going to be higher for us than it used to be as we get into our 40s and beyond because we're not absorbing the amino acids from our food as easily, right? And not only that, as our estrogen levels start to go down, we also lose the advantage that hormone gave us in holding on to our muscle. It's kind of an advantage we probably don't realize we had until we no longer have it. I think because estrogen just works quietly, like behind the scenes for years. It helps us recover more quickly, it gives us greater resilience in our tissue, and it helps us hold on to our muscle. And so as it starts to go down and we don't have that advantage, it's significant for us. And of course, progesterone supports bone remodeling and helps us with that important bone density piece. So as these levels start to drop, we really need to be paying attention to the type of strength training that I outlined in our last conversation. And we need to be providing the building blocks from our dietary protein a little bit more than we used to have, right? So that the body can draw on what it needs and it can do the muscle support and all of its other important jobs without breaking down and robbing the muscle tissue you already have. So really pay attention to your protein. And we've all got, different dietary preferences, and that's just fine. You can choose from any type of whole food protein source that works for you. I just don't want you to miss out on this information or downplay it thinking it's just for bodybuilders or that there's some detriment to your health from eating enough protein for your needs. Those old dietary guidelines for daily protein are really based on sedentary men and what would be baseline survival needs, right? Protein needs for women in peri or postmenopause, or for women who are active or trying to build muscle, are going to be much higher. And if you want to do more than just survive, if you want to thrive and not lose your muscle, if you want to be able to sculpt and strengthen your body from your workouts, you need this important building block, and you need more of it than you used to have. If you are highly active, you might want to aim for 1 gram per pound of your body weight. Or if you're moderately active, you might want to aim for like 0.7 or 0.8 grams per pound of your body weight. But really anywhere between 0.7 and 1 gram per pound of your body weight are a decent place to start at this life stage. But if that's just too much to figure out, just try getting between 30 and 40 grams of protein in each meal, assuming 3 main meals a day as a starting point. And if that's feels overwhelming or feels like too much, why don't you just start out by looking at how many grams of protein are in the meals you're eating now? And if it feels low, just try seeing where you could add 5 grams more in each meal. How could you get just a little more? Could you increase the amount of protein in the recipe that you're making to increase the amount of protein that you're having in each serving of that recipe throughout the week? If you have a medical reason for not eating protein, that's important to note. But if not, this lack of protein and the amino acids that our body really needs for so many jobs, this is so often the missing link that really helps women, especially in this life stage, start to move the needle when it comes to seeing body composition changes. And really the current research shows that it is safe, it is effective, and it has far-reaching benefits that include preventing muscle loss and impacting our brain health and cognitive decline. It has other benefits as well. When you put more protein on your plate and balance with your carbs and fat, you're going to feel more full and satisfied after a meal. And I know that sometimes breakfast might feel like a bit of a challenge, so you could try using my trick of dinner for breakfast. So you're not stuck on a traditional breakfast food all the time, which, tends to be higher in carbs and fat, both of which we need, but in a more balanced ratio to our protein, right? I've got some great recipes on the blog over at thebettyrocker.com in the breakfast section, but since this conversation is almost making me hungry, I like to start the day with a protein scramble. That's either tempeh or ground turkey or lean ground beef with garlic and veggies like bok choy or radicchio or spinach and a side of whole grain toast. Or I'll make, say, my homemade protein pancakes, which I make from my own brand of organic protein powder, eggs, and a banana. That's it, just mashed together, cook it in the pan. Such tasty pancakes. Or I might make a unicorn bowl, which is where I take my overnight oatmeal and I blend it in the blender with a little fruit, some protein powder, and whatever milk you like to make like a creamy, fiber-rich smoothie bowl. Or I might make a homemade frittata with cottage cheese or tofu added for a protein boost to the eggs. And yes, eggs are a great source of protein, and we always think of them with breakfast, right? But 2 eggs is only 12 grams of protein, and whole eggs also contain a lot of healthy fat as well. If I wanted to get 30 grams of protein just from my whole eggs, that would require me to eat about 5 eggs. And the equivalent amount of fat would be overwhelming to my system, and that wouldn't be super balanced for me. So we want to think outside the egg box at breakfast when we can, right? Or combine our eggs with other sources of protein like lentils or beans or breakfast meat or protein protein powder like I do with my easy protein pancakes, or if you tolerate dairy well, maybe it's Greek yogurt or cottage cheese. You can choose from so many different sources of protein for your different meals throughout the day, of course, in all of your other meals and your lunches, your dinners, and smoothies if you have a smoothie at some point in the day. And they're all going to have a variety of different amino acids, right? We just want to make sure that we're getting all the essential aminos in daily. Those are the ones that our body can't make on its own and it has to get from food. If you're an omnivore, you'll have no trouble as animal sources of protein contain the full spectrum. If you're a vegetarian, you want to just make sure you're choosing a variety of plants over the course of the day to really cover your bases. Or if you're pairing things like rice and beans in a meal, you can get the full spectrum right there. Or if you choose tempeh or tofu, those are more complete protein sources that are plant-based. I've done a great 2-part series about protein for women specifically, a podcast series that I would really recommend listening to, as it really goes in depth on what you need to know about protein for your life stage as an active woman. And I have some also amazing meal plans that really help you plan and eat enough protein as well and make it really easy and balanced with the rest of your nutrients. So if you need some support, you can definitely check those out. The second thing to really pay attention to with eating in peri or postmenopause is your gut health, right? It's always been important, but in the menopause years, we just want to get even more serious about protecting it and really eating in a way that supports it. The digestive system is where we digest and absorb all of our key nutrients, but it's also where many of our hormones are processed and excreted. And in perimenopause, when things start to fluctuate, we've got a lot of byplay between the gut and the hormones. And there's a lot that can go on that makes our gut even more sensitive, or makes it that it's really beneficial to pay attention to it even more than ever before. Our gut microbiome is this ecosystem of microbes that lives inside of our intestines and helps with things like digestion, destroys harmful bacteria, which is super protective for us. It helps to regulate our immune system, and that's obviously really important. I like to always picture the microbiome ecosystem like this sort of ancient rainforest, right? With all these animals and lichens and fungi and dark caves. It's like a place teeming with life that creates these massive amounts of helpful byproducts when it's treated with care and respect. So when our microbiome, this ecosystem that lives in our body, is working right, and we're treating it with care and respect, it benefits all of the rest of our body systems, including things like our sleep regulation, our mood regulation, and our hormone balance. So all of this impacts how we actually feel day to day. And within this ecosystem, we've got this specialized section called the estrobolome that packages up estrogen that's meant to be filtered out of our body through the liver. And the estrobolome is really affected by the entire gut microbiome. And if it's compromised, it can really struggle to do its task of supporting that filtration of our estrogen, which can cause that estrogen to re-enter our bloodstream as dirty estrogen. And many women really struggle with things like hot flashes or poor sleep in perimenopause, which are caused in part by an imbalance in our hormone levels. And if our microbiome isn't functioning well, or the estrobolome isn't able to process our estrogen correctly, we can experience worse symptoms. Like this can be one of the causes that makes some of those symptoms get worse. I know that poor sleep is something a lot of us struggle with in the menopause years. I've definitely been there. And while it can have many root causes, one can be imbalances in the microbiome that impact the production of serotonin. That's a really important hormone that's made in our gut. And serotonin is actually a precursor to melatonin, which is one we've all heard of, right? That's directly tied to our ability to get a good night's sleep. So if we don't have enough serotonin to produce the melatonin, we don't sleep well. Not to mention, serotonin's also really associated with a good mood. So lower levels of it can make us more unhappy and depressed and even feeling more anxious, which I was just telling you about last time we were talking. We're so much more sensitive to how we feel and our anxiety levels as our progesterone levels are declining. We really get even more sensitive to things like sugar in perimenopause, including the sugar from alcohol. How we eat and drink is totally a personal choice, of course, but alcohol has a lot of impacts on our hormones, and it really disrupts the microbiome as well. It can make our anxiety and depression worse. It can impact our sex drive and our sleep, and it can really increase inflammation. Plus, it adds extra calories that aren't as efficiently metabolized as food, making it harder to lose weight if you're struggling with that at all. I just noticed how much harder alcohol hit me as I got further into perimenopause myself, and I actually switched to almost completely non-alcoholic beverages at social gatherings when I'm out and about. I would just get the worst headaches from even a couple of drinks, and the cumulative effects of drinking a few times a week just felt unsustainable to me as my hormones changed. Now, I still enjoy a glass of champagne or a glass of wine from my family's vineyards, but I really don't have a drink after work or every weekend like I used to. And I think it's definitely helped with my symptoms. I also started another thing when it comes to beverages. I started drinking half decaf, half regular coffee. And I am completely uninterested in giving up on coffee entirely, but I've been really cognizant of the impact that caffeine has on our body and on our mind, and how it can really increase anxiety. It also can really make hot flashes worse and impact our sleep if we're not careful about the timing of it, right? All of that stuff with our hormones and how we're feeling and our mood, that all exists in a somewhat delicate balance in perimenopause as things are changing. So it's something that you may want to think about as just something that would be beneficial. So one compromise for me was half decaf, half regular coffee, right? So that helped me cut down on my caffeine intake. And I tend to be drinking my coffee with my meal these days, as opposed to like first thing in the morning. But really just, whatever works best for you. This isn't a hard and fast rule. I just want to share some of these things that have been really helpful, and some of the things that can really help you and support your entire being during this time of your life, right? And I just think that, paying attention to eating for better gut health and just thinking about really nourishing our bodies, it's important at every age, but in the menopause years, it's really key, because we want those nutrient-dense whole food meals that really fuel the good gut bacteria, that really support that ecosystem that's happening, that primordial rainforest, right? Like that we were talking about before. We want to make sure that we've got lots of fiber in all of our meals, which is going to come from our whole foods like greens and veggies and fruits, whole grains and legumes. Those are all going to really help keep our digestive system running smoothly, help us have those regular bowel movements, which are so important for eliminating waste byproducts and hormones. And that fiber is such an important component of our diet that helps keeps things, moving through the system. There are certain types of fiber that you'll hear about, like resistant starch, which feeds our friendly gut bacteria. So feeding that ecosystem and keeping it happy, that really helps it thrive and supports that better balance in the microbiome in our gut as well. And just fiber really helps reduce the impact that sugar has on our system. And that's going to help reduce weight gain and fat storage as well. So if you're eating a lot of fiber-rich veggies, you're getting a ton of health benefits, like increased access to vitamins and minerals and things like the compounds in cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower, which really support the liver in its metabolization of estrogen. And that's really, really helpful for keeping you more balanced. Now, I've touched on this a little bit, but I really feel like nutrient diversity and nutrient density are like two halves of this balanced, sort of gut-friendly, nourishing dietary approach that will really serve you well in perimenopause and postmenopause. So if you think about choosing from a colorful assortment of vegetables, rotating different types of plant foods in general, maybe throughout the recipes that you make over the course of the month, this will really give you access to the full spectrum of nutrients that your body needs. We're all going to be a little different when it comes to the exact foods for each of us. Our preferences play a role, right? And sometimes we even develop food sensitivities, which are very real. And figuring that out, if you think that might be a problem, can be really helpful when it comes to just supporting a healthier digestive system for you. You're unique, right? I suggest eliminating foods you think might be irritants if you suspect you have a food intolerance or sensitivity as a good place to start. That's really like, doesn't require you to go to the doctor or get any testing, although that's definitely a great step to take. But you can just remove things that you think might be bothering you if you think there's something that's bothering you. Some of the common ones really are things like gluten, dairy, eggs, even foods from the nightshade family like eggplants, potatoes, tomatoes. Those can actually be irritants to people. There's a lot of different foods that can bother our gut, but just listen to your body. If you feel things like bloating, if you're having things like diarrhea, if you're having pain or distress after eating, those might be signs that there's something that's not right. And there can be a lot of different reasons for that. It could be you're not well hydrated. It could be that you have low stomach acid. It could be that there's a food intolerance. There's a lot of different things that can cause that. But in perimenopause, I feel like it's really important to pay attention and to maybe start to investigate what these causes might be. It is when it comes to things that you really want to be getting in, one thing that I'm thinking about a lot, along with protein and fiber in my diet, is actually omega-3 fatty acids, because of how supportive they are for the body's inflammatory response. They really help balance the production of these pro-inflammatory compounds, right? They really help protect our blood vessels and our brain from inflammation. And they can really support our mood regulation, our sleep, and our temperature regulation, right? All of this stuff that really comes into play in the menopause years for us. Now, my favorite sources for getting omega-3s are salmon and other fatty fish. I love flax seeds, I love chia seeds, and I love walnuts. Oh my gosh. There's a lot of foods that have omega-3s. Those are just some of my favorites. And the other foods that I've really started prioritizing thanks to their anti-inflammatory benefits include things like turmeric. I've been finding reasons to put turmeric in my food. Ginger, I love ginger. And of course, my favorite, dark chocolate. I'm also really thinking about calcium in perimenopause and beyond, right? It's an essential nutrient that's tied into our bone health. Calcium really needs other nutrients like vitamin D and magnesium to work effectively. So just be mindful if you're taking a calcium supplement that by itself, it's not as effective. Leafy greens, almonds, and sardines are all good sources of calcium. And I actually started eating more things like Greek yogurt and cottage cheese in perimenopause because I'm okay with more fermented type dairy products, and they are great sources of calcium. Speaking of vitamin D, we need it for the proper absorption of calcium and our bone health, but we also need it for blood sugar regulation, for our immune health, and our mood. So get out there and get some sunshine whenever you can to make that vitamin D, but know that you can also get it in some of those dairy products, in fish and leafy greens. There are lots of dietary sources of vitamin D as well that are usually really complementary to your calcium-rich food sources. Now, last time we were talking about how that drop off in our progesterone really impacts our bone density. So we want to make sure that we're really paying attention to the things in our food intake that can support us as best we can in these transition years. Because nutrient absorption is a very fundamental process of our digestion, right? We don't just eat for energy, we also eat for the absorption of the vitamins and minerals that are in our foods. And those drive a lot of really essential health processes that are directly tied to the glands and the aspects of our hormone health that are really important to us in this life stage and beyond. For instance, our thyroid needs plenty of vitamin B12, it needs selenium, and it needs iron for proper cell function. Our adrenal glands need vitamins like B, C, D, and minerals like zinc and magnesium to function properly. And our ovaries need things like vitamin D, folate, zinc, omega-3s, and other vitamins and minerals. And just those 3 glands that I mentioned, those are all really important aspects of our hormone health that need care and balance in the perimenopause years and beyond. So we just want to make sure that we're really taking care of our gut health so that it can really absorb all of these essential nutrients that do so much to support this transition phase that we go through, right? And don't forget, let's make sure we're drinking plenty of water. Staying hydrated is a really important aspect of our ability to absorb the nutrients that are in the foods that we're eating and really help us have that optimal digestive flow. There's absolutely a dietary component when it comes to regulating our health as best we can, and you have a direct impact on this with your food choices. So there are a lot of reasons to be really mindful of what we're eating, paying attention to that nutrient diversity from whole food sources and helping to support that healthy gut ecosystem and all of the many systems that it impacts when it's functioning well. And if all of this just sounds really complicated, it doesn't have to be. When I'm really maxed out but determined to do my best for myself, I literally pick 2 simple recipes each week. I cook a big batch of each one and I rotate between them for lunch and dinner each day. Then I change my recipe the following week and I do something completely different. And if you get too bored with something like this, you can cook more meals with different foods throughout the week, or you can cook afresh each night. You can batch prep for the week with lots of different recipes. You can cook on the fly. We're all different, and I use a variety of those techniques just depending on what's going on with my life. Sometimes cooking more often is fun. Other times I just need simplicity to make it through the week. And what we really want to avoid, of course, is causing disruption or imbalances in that ecosystem of our gut, which can happen for a lot of reasons. One is, we've touched on this before, too much sugar in our system, which can cause this proliferation of yeast growth or bacterial overgrowth. A bacterial overgrowth in the gut, which is known as SIBO, is a common cause of bloating, gas, fatigue, and indigestion. And yeast overgrowth in the gut, known typically as candida, can cause things like bloating, gas, abdominal pain, fatigue, vaginal infections, and more. And that can happen also when we've got things like excessive sugar intake going on, or we maybe have a weakened immune system, or say we've been using antibiotics or even eating a lot of processed foods. I mean, we have to think about it. If we've got an ecosystem that's supposed to be like this ancient rainforest inside our gut, and we introduce like the Vegas Strip or Candyland, it's going to pollute the environment, right? It's going to generate a lot of waste byproducts, and it's going to cause the animals, or in this case, the gut bugs, to be pretty disrupted. So if we need antibiotics to treat something, it's not like we shouldn't take them, but it's good to be aware that they wipe out both good and bad gut bacteria. So after we take them, our gut takes some time to repopulate the ecosystem. We can help that along by using probiotics, for example, or eating fermented foods like kimchi or yogurt or sauerkraut, but we have to be aware of the things that can cause these disruptions to that delicate ecosystem. If we've taken antibiotics, to use that example, and the microbiome needs a little time to repopulate those friendly gut bacteria, and we eat a bunch of sugary foods or we drink a bunch of sugary drinks, we're pouring that onto a system that's already compromised. And that's where we might run into some problems that slowly start to compound. And conversely, say you're eating some sugary foods like pretty regularly, but you don't notice any digestive issues from that. But then suddenly you get sick, and maybe your immune system is low. If you keep piling that sugar onto an already weakened immune system, your body just doesn't have the reserves to repopulate and rebalance the gut microbiome, and you might end up having some type of yeast overgrowth or bacterial overgrowth. So just keep in mind that these things can really compound, and in the menopause years, we need to be really mindful of our fluctuating hormone levels and the symbiotic relationship they have with that ecosystem in our gut. The two really work together. So supporting better gut health supports our hormones. Even in perimenopause, when things are fluctuating, a strong microbiome and balanced estrobolome are going to give you a strong foundation as you go through those transition years. Whereas, if we're eating a lot of processed foods and sugar and drinking excessive amounts of alcohol, those can all really disrupt the microbiome and strip away that sort of foundational support that our body has in our hormone regulation. I mean, in perimenopause, we've got a lot going on already, right? Taking care of our gut health can be one thing we can do to support the system as it changes. Now, if you are suffering from bloating or some type of digestive systems and you wonder if it's something like candida or SIBO or even parasites, there are plenty of great tests your doctor can order for you to take a look at your stool and assess what's going on. I've been tested and treated a couple of times over the past 6 years for different things, including candida at one point, SIBO really early on in perimenopause, and I did a test for parasites not too long ago, which thankfully was negative, but I'm really glad that I checked. And treating those things was relatively easy, and it also just gave me a deeper respect for my gut microbiome in general, and I really started to get more serious about being more consistent with the ways that I was taking care of and nourishing my gut, right? Just doing all of these things that we're talking about here. And that process took some time, right? It takes time to integrate all of this information, so don't feel like you have to do it all at once. And also a simple thing that you can do today is to chew your food more slowly and more mindfully. It's so easy to rush through a meal or just like inhale our food without realizing it because we're busy with other tasks or we're looking at our phone. But just taking a few minutes to really focus on your food and on chewing it slowly and deliberately enough times before swallowing it will help support your body's natural process of beginning the digestive process in your mouth with that salivary amylase. And it will better prepare you to absorb those important nutrients from your food. So, to recap, include more protein, include more fiber-rich plant foods from a broad spectrum, slow down when you eat, and drink plenty of water. Avoid excessive amounts of sugar, processed foods, alcohol, and caffeine. Not like you have to avoid those things altogether, but avoid excessive amounts of them, right? And think about really supporting your microbiome ecosystem and tending to that vital environment that lives within you. All of the things we talked about today would be beneficial at any age of our lives. So if you're making some of these changes and feel like they're only for you in perimenopause or postmenopause, no, they can benefit anyone in your family who gets on board. They're just the dials that will really most significantly support you in this stage of life, and if you pay attention to them, they'll really accumulate and give you a stronger foundation to go through the changes that these declining hormones have on our bodies. And if you combine these tips with the training tips I shared with you in our last conversation, there is like nothing that can stop you from holding onto your muscle, sculpting even more, losing or maintaining your body fat, really improving your bone density for years to come, and really just thriving through your perimenopause years and into postmenopause as well. And just also remember, it's all or something, right? Not all or nothing. I know I shared a ton of information about hormones, nutrients, body systems, and their complex connections today. So don't worry if you don't remember it all, or if you need time to integrate and practice this stuff. I encourage you to talk to your doctor or get some one-on-one support if you can. We all have unique bodies and needs. And while perimenopause and menopause happens to us all, the timing of it, the way it happens, and how it affects each one of us is going to be unique to us. So the things we're able to do on our own can be really supportive to our changing hormones, but the hormones are still going to change, right? Doing what we can do on our own with things like a balanced training approach, with eating to support our gut health and hold on to our muscle tissue. This will all really help us to go through this transition more easily. So just take your time trying things out. And again, all or something, right? Not all or nothing. Try out my PeriMenoFit program if you are in perimenopause and you want a workout plan to follow that also has those protein-forward, high-fiber recipes. You can also get that link in the show notes page or just go to the bettyrocker.com/peri. And if you're just looking for a nutritional leg up, all of my meal plans really include the same focus on protein and fiber balance and have a really strong anti-inflammatory food component that enables you to get a broad spectrum of nutrients with all those vitamins and minerals that you need, that nutrient diversity and that real nutrient density. And you can shop them over on the bettyrocker.com store, where you can also find my amazing Rock Your Life Fitness membership, where we have challenges. You can do a new challenge every month, and we have specific programming tailored to my ladies in peri and postmenopause inside of Rock Your Life, and that is an amazing place to be as well. So as always, my friends, thank you so much for listening today. It has been really great to spend some time with you. I look forward to hearing from you. So drop me a line over on the blog or the show notes page, or send me a message on social media. I'm always looking forward to hearing from you. And I'm also looking forward to our next conversation. So until then, I'm Betty Rocker, and you are so awesome, blossom, and amazing. Bye for now.
This podcast is for information purposes only. Statements and views expressed on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Brie Singer, Betty Rocker Inc., and the producers disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. Before starting a new exercise, fitness or health protocol, or if you think you have a medical problem, always consult a licensed physician.